The crime scene lecture. Physical evidence encompasses any and all objects that can establish that a crime has been committed or can link a crime and its victim or its perpetrator. Forensic science begins at the crime scene. The crime scene investigators must recognize physical evidence and properly preserve it for a laboratory examination. The first officer arriving at the crime scene must first give priority to individuals needing medical assistance. However, further assistance is weighed against maintaining the integrity of the physical evidence. For example, victims of assault are provided medical care, but are discouraged from bathing or changing clothes because of the nature of the evidence. Then the first officer will detain and remove suspects. Arresting suspects prevents them from returning and contaminating the crime scene. The first officer must preserve and protect the area as much as possible. Ropes or barricades along with strategic positioning of guards will prevent unauthorized access to the area. Crime scene investigative team then secures and isolates the crime scene and establishes a crime scene perimeter. Every individual who enters the scene has the potential to destroy physical evidence. The four parts to the basic crime scene protocol are the interview, the examination, the scene documentation, and the processing. Crime scene technician must interview the first officer at the scene or the victim to ascertain the theory of the case, what allegedly happened, what crime took place, and how the crime was committed. True or not, it will give the crime scene technician a base from which to start. If detectives on the scene have begun witness interviews, they may offer details that point to a CSI to a particular room of the house or type of evidence. Most CSIs do not talk to witnesses because they do not have training and proper interview techniques. Crime scene technicians examine the scene to ascertain if the theory of the case is substantiated by what they observe. By examining the scene, they identify possible items of evidentiary nature, identify point of entry and point of exit, and they get the general layout of the crime scene. During an initial walkthrough, the crime scene technicians follow a predetermined path that is likely to contain the least amount of evidence that would be destroyed by walking through it. They take note of any detail that will change in time, such as what's the weather like, any notable smells, gas, decomposition, or sounds, and they also identify any potential hazards such as a gas leak and address those immediately. Crime scene documentation occurs during a second walkthrough of the scene, following the same path as the initial walkthrough. If there is more than one CSI in the scene, one will take photos, one will create sketches, one will take detailed notes, the other might perform a video walkthrough. If there is only one CSI, all of these jobs are his or hers. The goal of the crime scene documentation is to permanently record the condition of the crime scene and its physical evidence. They create a record that will allow the forensics lab and the prosecuting attorney to easily recreate an accurate view of the scene. Documentation should be followed in the following sequence of taking notes, then videotaping, then photographing, and finally sketching. The crime scene documentation notes should include the notification information, which are date and time, method of notification, and information received. The arrival information, which includes the means of transportation, date and time, personnel present at the scene, and any notifications to be made. The scene description, which includes weather, location type and condition, major structures, identification of transient and conditional evidence, as well as any clothing, furniture, and weapons present. The victim description, which includes position, wounds, clothing, jewelry, and identification, as well as the crime scene team, which includes the assignments of the team members, the walkthrough information, beginning and ending times, and evidence handling results. The crime scene documentation notes should be taken as activities are completed to prevent memory loss. Accurate notes taking is crucial at initial crime scene investigation and subsequent investigations. Notes should be made as events unfold and in chronological order. They should be detailed with a step-by-step of all actions, complete and thorough, consider who, what, where, why, and how, clearly written and legible. They include negative or unexpected conditions such as the absence of blood stains, lights that were found on, and as specific as possible. For example, on the living room floor, 6 inches from the east wall and 3 feet south of the north wall, and avoid vague statements as near or to the left of, and uses the art of scientific observation. For example, whereas a layperson may see a large brownish red stain on the carpet spreading outward from the corpse and write down blood spreading outward from underside of corpse, a CSI would write down large brownish red fluid spreading outward from underside of corpse. This fluid might be blood, might be also be decomposition fluid, which resembles blood at a certain stage. When they describe a crime scene, they should make factual observation without drawing any conclusions. Videotaping enables a three-dimensional portrayal of the scene. Videography should follow the crime scene survey or the walkthrough. Videotaping of crime scene is an orientation format, and the operator should remain objective in recording the crime scene. The videotape should not show members of the crime scene team or their equipment, and it should not be narrated or include audio discussion of subjective information at the scene. The videotape operator should introduce the video, which includes the case number, the date and time, location, and the videographer in the form of a printed placard or spoken by the videotape operator. They begin with the scene surroundings, which includes roads to and from the scene, before taping the general views of the scene, and use the 4 compass points as a guide. They provide a general orientation of the scene. They tape the orientation of items of evidence in relation to the overall scene. They use wide-angle views followed by close-up views of items of evidence. They do not jump from one item of evidence to another, and use smooth transitions that includes the overall locations of the evidence. They also include the victim's viewpoint, move to a safe location near the victim, and tape the 4 compass points as viewed away from the victim. They use proper camera techniques, make smooth movements, use tripod or monopod, use additional lighting for interior scenes. The original video constitute evidence and should not be edited or changed. They should make copies of videos if needed. Photographs of the crime scene are taken to record a pictorial view of what the scene looks like and to record items of possible evidence. It provides investigators with a record that can be analyzed or examined subsequent to the scene investigation and serves as a permanent record for legal concerns. Photographs of the crime scene is normally done immediately following the videography of the scene or after the preliminary scene survey. There are 3 categories: the overall view, the mid-range, and the close-up, and the CSIs take pictures of everything before touching or moving possible pieces of evidence. Overall photos provide the widest possible views of the entire scene. Exterior photos include surroundings, buildings and major structures, roads and paths of travel into or away from the scene, street signs and survey markers, as well as photos of any spectators at this scene. These last shots might identify a possible witness or even a suspect. For interior photos, they use the 4 compass points or room corners as guides. They take photos of overlapping views, doors leading into and from the structure, and they use tripod and low light situation for increased depth of focus concerns. They also include views of all rooms, not just the room where the crime scene seems to have occurred, with photos taken from each corner and overhead. For mid-range photos, the photographer follows a stepwise progression of views. The photographer uses various lenses or changes the focal length of the lens to view individual items of evidence in relation to the original view of the crime scene. Photographers also use flash to enhance details or pattern evidence. Close-up photos provide the forensics lab with views to assist in analyzing evidence. For close-up photos, they use documentation placards, use a tripod and professional lighting techniques such as flash and side lighting to achieve the best possible detail and clarity. Close-up photos should show any serial numbers or other identifying characteristics, as well as they take photos with and without scales. The photographer must document the details of every photo. They should include the photograph number, a description of the object or scene in the photograph, the location of the object or scene, the time and date the photograph was taken, and any other descriptive details that might be relevant. Sketches are used to demonstrate the layout of the crime scene. It is easier to depict the entire scene. Sketches can span several rooms, and particular aspects of the scene will benefit from exact measurements. Also, sketches can demonstrate the exact position of the deceased victim or evidence within the crime scene. Rough sketches are made by the investigator on the scene. It need not be drawn to scale, but the proportions should be approximated and the appropriate measurements or dimensions shown. The rough sketch may be used as a basis for the finished drawing. No changes should be made on the original sketch after the investigator has left the scene. The finished drawing is made primarily for courtroom presentation. It is generally based on the rough and drawn to scale by a person skilled in either mechanical or architectural drawing. There are four main types of perspectives. The overview sketch consists of a bird's eye view or floor plan sketch of the scene. This is the most common type of sketch and consists of items on the horizontal plane. The elevation sketch portrays a vertical plane rather than a horizontal plane. Examples include blood-stain patterns on vertical surfaces such as walls or cabinetry and bullet holes through windows. Exploded view or cross-projection sketch consists of a combination of the first two sketches. It is similar to a floor plan except the walls have been laid out flat and objects on them have been shown in their relative positions. The perspective sketch depicts the scene or item of interest in 3 dimensions. It is the most difficult sketch to create and requires some artistic skill. The 3 main techniques for obtaining measurements are the baseline, triangulation, and the rectangular coordinates. One of the most common methods used to measure a crime scene is known as the baseline measurement system. The baseline method generally begins by the establishment of a single reference point. A tape measure is then extended parallel to the scene from the reference point to an endpoint, which then becomes a second reference point. A baseline is most often established along a curb or sidewalk in order to simplify the measurement. Measurements are then made from a point on the tape to an object in the scene. Measurements are always made at a 90-degree angle to the tape. Measurements are then recorded according to their geographic location relative to the tape. In the baseline method, you transect the crime scene by laying down a tape measure along some convenient line so it crosses the entire area. Locate this line in the diagram from fixed points at the scene. Locate objects in the crime scene by measuring their distance from this established baseline. Measurements must be taken at right angles to the tape and record how far along the baseline the distance out to the object was measured. This provides the 2 measurements needed to locate the object. The triangulation method is generally considered the most accurate method for measuring the relative position of an object within a scene. However, it is more manpower intensive than the baseline method. Triangulation utilizes 2 or more reference points to establish the position of an object. By drawing a line that connects the 2 reference points and extending a line from each of the reference points to the object being measured, a triangle is formed. Ideally, the distance between both reference points and the object being measured would be the same, however, this is rarely the case. The rectangular coordinates method is typically used for measuring an indoor crime scene. To establish the position of an object in a room, measurements are taken from 2 different walls within the room that are perpendicular to one another. The tape measure is held perpendicular to the wall when the measurement is taken to ensure 90-degree angles from the wall to the object being measured. An object, item 1, is located by making a measurement at right angles from each of 2 walls. This works well for indoor measurements. When illustrating the sketch, do not attempt to draw an object as it appears. Use symbols instead. Use lettered or numbered squares, circles, figures, or points to represent various objects in the sketch. Explain in the diagram key what these objects represent. If photography markers are used, ensure they correspond to the same objects in the sketch. For example, if photo marker number 5 is used to mark a handgun, make sure the handgun in the sketch is labeled number 5. Label all doors and windows. Show with a curved line which way the door swings. Use an arrow to show the direction of the stairway, and unnecessary height or length may be cut off with jagged lines. The following should be recorded on the sketch: address or location of the scene, case number, date sketch was made and by whom, a key to identify the different objects in the sketch, an arrow to show the direction of north, the scale that was used for the sketch, or the statement not to scale. In drawing the scale diagrams, to avoid a distorted view of the scene, measurements must be reduced in proportion so that they bear correct relationship to each other. Select the scale of the diagram by fitting the longest dimension in the scene to the area of the paper being used. Graph paper should be used when creating this type of sketch. Each block represents a specified length of measurement. Use convenient units for the scale. For example, 1 block equals 1 foot. Not to scale diagrams are used because the sketch can be accomplished more quickly than a scale diagram. Items are placed in the diagram based on approximation. This type of diagram may provide a distorted view of the scene. Correct proportions and relationships between objects may not be maintained. Measurements are recorded on a sketch or in a chart. This rough sketch may be used to complete a scale diagram later. These diagrams should be clearly marked not to scale. The following equipment is required to complete a sketch: a supply of writing implements. Pencils may be used for the overall sketch. A sketcher may choose to use red pencils to denote blood stains, or highlighters or other colored pencils to mark different types of evidence on the sketch. A sketch created in pencil will need to be preserved in some permanent manner as soon as possible. A good method of doing this is to photocopy the finished sketch and include the photocopy with the original. They also include blank paper. Graph paper, while not essential, simplifies scale drawing. A drawing surface such as a clipboard. Measuring devices. Tape measures are the most common tool used and should be at least 50 to 100 feet long. Other measuring devices may include a surveyor's wheel, a laser rangefinder, or a total station. GPS coordinates may be useful in locating an outdoor scene. Also require a ruler for drawing straight lines, drawing to scale and making very short measurements, as well as a magnetic compass to determine true north. Tips for creating this sketch. If the scene is large, make a very rough sketch of the area while obtaining an overall view of the scene. This initial rough sketch serves as a reference when making more complete sketches. Enlarged sections of this rough sketch can be made as separate drawings in order to bring out greater detail. Begin taking measurements and laying out a rough sketch. First, lay down a baseline. This usually consists of the longest uninterrupted side of a room, or if outdoors, the curb line, building line, or even an imaginary line between two fixed points. Take other measurements of the periphery of the scene and add them to the baseline. Third, having established the outer boundaries of the sketch, add various objects in their proper locations. Measurements. Write them down. Measurements can be recorded directly on the sketch or in a chart. Long distances may be measured with the odometer of an automobile. Critical measurements should be checked by two people. Here is an example of a rough sketch. Here is an example of a finished sketch. This concludes part 1 of the crime scene lecture.